Welcome on in, guys. Tobin here with you, and thanks for checking out the channel. Hope you're doing great out there. If you guys could subscribe, that'd be great. And appreciate you stopping by. So I said on the Jimmy Butler video that I did, I wanted to get to some other Erik Spoelstra comments at the end of his media session yesterday that I found pretty fascinating because it kind of came with a little piss and vinegar from Erik Spoelstra. And this was kind of classic Erik Spoelstra, doesn't want to hear the noise, doesn't really want to be part of any of this stuff. And it will be interesting. Like, I'm doing this early in the morning on Wednesday. The Heat do practice again today. And so will Jimmy Butler end up speaking at practice? I don't know. I told you guys I wouldn't read too much into it if he doesn't, just because Jimmy will not speak after practices from time to time. But it also could be one of those things where, as he has been more accessible this year, I think, and I wouldn't be surprised if he just wants to put an end to it. It's not like he hasn't addressed the contract stuff before this season. So that'll remain to be seen, and certainly if he does speak, we'll have further reaction to it later on today. But this was kind of a non-Jimmy thing, and I'm curious what you guys think of, like, who this is a message at. So this was kind of one of those classic. I thought this was kind of one of those classic Erik Spoelstra veer-offs, like Pat Riley will have from time to time, where, like, nobody asked Pat Riley about this, but he just wants to make this point across. I remember asking, in my one-on-one that I got to have with Pat Riley, I remember asking him a real lollipop softball question about, like, the Heat had like a bunch of guys in All-Star Weekend where it was like Derek Jones won the dunk contest, Bam won the skills, and you remember you had Tyler in the 3-point, Jimmy was there. Like, it was a fun weekend for the Heat. And so I had, like, asked him, what that meant. And, like, he just completely, like, took the wheels of that and was basically like, no one's picking us. He, like, used it as a thing to steer off into disrespect, right? So Erik Spoelstra was doing that, where he was addressing the trade noise, and he made this point. You guys heard it yesterday, where he was like, oh, everybody's had rumor after rumor about the guy who just won Player of the Week, and he's still around here. But then he went off into this other tangent afterwards, and I'm going to play it here for you guys, and I wonder what you guys make of it, who this is a message at. Is this a message to the media? Is this a message to the fans? Is this a message to his team? But this was Erik Spoelstra after addressing the Jimmy Butler stuff. Just isn't asked anything else, just kind of finishes off the press conference talking about this.
And along those lines, too, I don't want to talk about anybody's touches, shot attempts, their role. You know what the role is? Whatever the role has been the last 3 games. That's what it is. That's what I want everybody focusing on, and see if we can continue that.
There you go. Man, doesn't want to talk about role, doesn't want to talk about touches. The role is doing whatever it takes to get it done and winning. Keep doing what they have been doing. That's the focus. And I just found that to be a fascinating, like, dismount from Erik Spoelstra, where it was like, oh, I don't give a rat's ass about rumors. I don't give a rat's ass about anybody in the locker room, anybody else talking about roles of young guys like Nikola Jovic, Khalil Ware, Jaime Jaquez, Terry Rozier, Kevin Love, anybody who's talking about, myself included, the media, the fans, the agents. Maybe it is to the agents, representing, we got a big year coming up for you. Spo is, like, locked in, dude. It's maybe that was the thing too. Like, it was a message to just everybody on the outside right now who wants to talk about how they think it should be better and how you think he should be running teams. He basically just gave you double middle fingers and is just like, oh, that's what you guys think, and that's cool, but we're gonna put all the work in. We got a couple of practice days here and got a couple of practice days, get a good amount of practice time here for this roster, which is good for them, that they'll get even more time, not only because they can kind of get some rest for their veterans like Love and Jimmy, but they can also get after this. And in the meanwhile, get a couple practices a day, probably get probably get in one or two more practices over the weekend. And, that's, it's been rare in these days. They don't practice as much in the NBA, but I was like, that was very Riley-esque from Spo to be like, not here to hear about how, the untrained eye thinks Jovic or Kalel Ware should be getting backup minutes or getting these types of things or whatever. Shut up. And who's going to be the guy I think can win? And whoever has the best practice, whoever performs the best, whoever can be the key to that. If that's Drew Smith, if that's Alec Burks, if that's Nico, if that's Kalel, who is back with the team, by the way. He was back up from Sioux Falls getting some time, which I think these are important days for guys like that. This has been maybe not the most interesting thing. By the way, I think Nico actually didn't practice yesterday. I think he was sent home because he was sick. So that's a tough one on that, because certainly these are almost as important as games for him if he wants to be a part of that. And I think, was Pelle Larsson there yesterday? He was still dealing. I think he was still dealing with that ankle. Yeah, there was no Nico, no Pella, and no Josh Richardson at practice. So we'll see. He turned his ankle at a couple practices ago for the Miami Heat. And yeah, I don't know. I was just, when I listened to that, I was like, who the hell is he? Like, who is this going at to just make sure this message is out there? Nobody asked about it. It was about a trade. It wasn't really about anything else.
And along those lines, too, I don't want to talk about anybody's touches, shot attempts, their role. You know what the role is? Whatever the role has been the last 3 games. That's what it is. That's what I want everybody focusing on, and see if we can continue that.
All right. So, yeah, like nothing is changing. And to be fair, like, the Heat are playing their best basketball. He's found a starting lineup that has one of the best net ratings in the league, if not the best, I think, for the amount of touches they've had together. Top 10 offense right now, which they haven't had. Everything is trending in the right direction for this Miami Heat team. Are they perfect? Yeah, certainly not. Like, I think that there are things, and that was the interesting thing with the Jimmy Butler thing that isn't going to be talked about enough with the whole trade thing. By the way, I'm getting too scatterbrained here. The one thing that's not talked about is, all right, well, what if the Heat do have a good next 15 games? What if they get through the next quarter of the season and the Heat actually feel really good about where they're at? This does seem like an East that is starting to, the Bucks are coming along. Bucks had a great performance against the Magic yesterday. The Magic are obviously very banged up. Knicks, Bucks. Like, I think the top 6 right now, the only team I'm surprised that's struggling as bad as it is, to me, that I look like a dummy, the team that I thought would be better would be Indiana. And they've not been what I thought they would be, and obviously Philadelphia's gone through a bunch of tumultuous stuff, but the other top 6 is kind of settled in a place where everybody thought it would be, other than Cleveland being as good as they have been. Boston has still been damn good. Orlando's dealt with everything hellacious, and they've still been gutsy. Jalen Suggs is playing out of his mind. New York is playing good basketball too, and the Bucks have been playing tremendous. So, but is there a spot in there for the Heat to kind of go on their run? Can they put together a massive win streak or a massive blank out of blank games that they win that puts them right in the fold there to a point where the Heat would actually think about making a move and maybe flipping a young guy that they're just like, you know what, it ain't, we don't know, and we put this guy with some salary and that adds on, and almost like what they did with is there another move that he could make in the ilk of Precious and salary for Lowry that this team could make, obviously without signing like the monster long-term deal, but thinking like, all right, or Are they just like, hey, we kind of did that with Terry Rozier last year. It hasn't worked out the way that we thought it would because of injury role, all that stuff. It's all about just standing pat this year. So I don't know. But I want to close out on this. You guys, and this is kind of a leapfrog off of what I was talking about from the Cavs game, where I was like, man, this got no respect. You remember how like last year, everybody was laughing at Tyler Hero in the Heat's package, and they're just like, oh, you'll take it and like it, right? So I was watching NBA Today yesterday, because people are like, man, Tobin, why do you watch that? Because one, I like to hate watch. I think that should be known about me. People always say, like, why do you watch it if you don't like it? I like to be mad when I watch stuff. That's it's the old. If you guys have ever seen the movie Private Parts, it's the Howard Stern movie back in the day when Howard Stern was the biggest thing in radio, and they always they would say, we surveyed all these people, and it's like 50% of the people who listen to Howard Stern say, why do you listen to Howard Stern? And they say, because I want to hear what he says next. And they say 70% of the people who dislike Howard Stern say, why do you listen to him? And says, because I have to hear what he says next. And that's kind of like and I don't know if I got that line exactly right, but the point was the haters like to listen even more because I like to feel stuff just to get mad at. I like to feel mad at what I listen to sometimes. That's why I'll listen to Lil Willie. That's why I'll listen to Hoopla. I listen to these things because I like to get mad, which is probably something I should work on. But to be fair, I listen to a lot of our local guys too. I listen to everything. I'm a media fiend. And it's never been easier to access everything. So I'm watching this yesterday, right? Because they already did the thing the day before where they put together the fake trade for Jimmy Butler. And that was kind of like at least acceptable because they're like giving us some young guys. And I was like, all right, cool. And then I'm watching these mother bleepers on ESPN, and they're talking about the Rockets trade to Jimmy. And they're like, I don't know. Perk's like, I wouldn't make that move. They got a good thing going, which is fine. I'm fine with you having that opinion. Then they're like, I wouldn't trade those young guys on the Rockets for Jimmy Butler. But then Bobby Marks sits there with this like sly smile, and he goes to his stupid trade machine. And I'm like, Bobby Marks is supposed to be a reputable front office connoisseur. Like he's supposed to be a guy who's like he's supposed to give me like the real deal of it and like how it should be done. Now, he's made some goofy trades when he was a GM, but that's neither here nor there. And he goes to the trade machine and he's like, well, what if we didn't have to trade the young guys and we had to trade to the Heat Dillon Brooks? I forget even who the other guy was, but he was none of the young guys that any Heat fan would want. It was not Thompson. It wasn't, Jabari Smith. It wasn't Cam Whitmore. It wasn't like any of the guys that you'd be like, oh, I'm kind of down for getting that. Jalen Green is obviously, any of these top young guys, they're probably not going to give up. But like any of the other young guys that would like give the Heat incentive to trade Jimmy Butler, they're like, what if it was Dillon Brooks and Aaron Holiday? I forget who the other guy was. Not even like Reed Shepherd from like their first round pick from this year. None of that stuff. Who doesn't really play for them. None of those guys were guys that Bobby Marks threw in the trade. And I was just like, isn't it funny that the Heat have to take the take it or like it deal? And he's making the Houston Rockets bro trade of like, you'll get Dillon Brooks and Sally Filler just for Jimmy Butler. And I'm like, why would the Heat do that? Like I wouldn't, it's nothing against Dillon Brooks, who actually, I think there's been rumors about the Heat liking him in the past, and I think the Heat would probably dig having Dillon Brooks, but they're not going to just take Dillon Brooks, and like that's the highlight of the deal. I think he was like, there's some picks. It better be a lot of picks. But it was just kind of one of those things where I was like, it's funny how the Heat, like, I felt like when the Heat were making the Damian Lillard talks, like I was always part of like, hey, you got to have to give to get. You can't just like be like, oh, we're going to fleece him, which I kind of think is how the Heat went about it, even though I know that people were like, oh, there's non-communication. They were kind of strong-arming him, right? They felt like they had that top game to that top position to strong-arm the Trailblazers and blew up in their face. But I was just like, isn't that funny? These mother bleepers who were like, oh, no, Tyler Hero and Jaime and Nico and these guys aren't good enough. And now you have a guy who's a fringe all-star who is who just won Player of the Week, and they're like, nah. They dismissed it, but now they're like, oh yeah, take Dylan Brooks for Jimmy Butler. I'm like, oh yeah, you think the Heat are gonna do that? That's funny. It's funny to me. Oh man. Anyway, that being said, the Spo thing on the roll, it was just one of those things where I was like, who's he talking to there? Like, is that a, you know, I'm sure these are things that he's told players in the meeting, but why does he have that out there in the media? Like, is he sick of the radio? Like, because, you know, I suppose not a guy I think who listens, but he obviously has they have a great media team that does know everything that goes on. They follow everything on Twitter. They follow the shows. So is that a message at the segments, the mailbags, the Ask Ira columns, the podcast, the whatever? Like, is that just like, you guys can talk about this all you want, and my team can listen to it all they want, and their people on their teams can listen to it all they want? I'm not changing any roles from public pressure. And I'm also letting everybody know, no whining in the locker room is going to get you roles, touches, or anything. It is about wins. And I found that to be an interesting thing for him just to kind of bring up in the midst of what's going on with the Jimmy Butler trade noise, where he called it gibberish, but also doesn't want to hear about anybody getting more this, more that. It's about getting to the win. It was very, Spo leaning into his Rileyisms.